Hello, my name is Luke, and I'm a software developer, engineer, what have you. And I want to talk to you about my recent experience in interviewing for software jobs. So I've been in software since 2016. Recently had a layoff, and I had to go through, the interview process again. And so just kind of, hey, opportunity to tell other people what it's like in case they haven't been through it. So this video is kind of for people trying to get into software and who haven't really started interviewing a lot yet. You haven't had 3+ interviews. So in software, you know, it's been my experience that a lot of the jobs I find myself pursuing or, being a candidate for come to me through recruiters, or I find through recruiters. And once you have been in software for a while, the reality is recruiters kind of find you as long as you make yourself, findable. You're on LinkedIn and active, and you change your open to open to work, whatever, and then recruiters start contacting you. So the first experience you have with a job, a position, is usually a phone screen with a third party recruiter. That's 90% of the time the case in my case. And everybody's different. You might be applying to jobs, so you might have people who work directly at the company reaching out to you. you know, I've even had like an owner of a small, local company reach out to me before. So it could be anything, but a lot of times it's third party recruiters. So that you have a phone screen with them. They ask you about your tech stack, your background, and that's just a conversation that you're having with someone to see if, hey, should we submit this person for this position? And if you have experience with 50% of the tech stack or more, you're potentially a candidate. Any less than that, and then you should just kind of probably tell them, kill the conversation, say like, hey, I don't think I'm a good fit for this. Avoid the phone call if you can, if you have experience with less than 50% of the tech stack, because it's just probably not going to happen. And when I say experience, I realize I'm talking to people who haven't worked in software before, so I'm talking about stuff that you've used in your boot camp or your self-taught or your CS degree, whatever, that kind of experience. So the phone screen, you make it past that, and then they submit you for the job. And, you are not in the company's interviewing pipeline and process until then. So if they get back to you after the recruiter submits you and say, hey, they want to set up an interview, then you're in the company's interviewing pipeline. So companies' interviewing processes, vary as often as, however many companies are there, that's how many interviewing processes there are. But generally you have like a phone screen of some kind, coding interview, and maybe like a behavioral cultural kind of interview. And so what I want to talk about is the coding interview, right? So, back in 2016 when I got into software, coding interviews were kind of the exception. I had 6 or 7 interviews to get my first software job, and I think one of them I had a coding interview. This time, after I got laid off a couple weeks ago and went through the interviewing process, all except for I think one had a coding interview, and the one that didn't have a coding interview is the one that I accepted. It just worked out that way. I did pass some of my coding interviews, but I'm not very good at coding interviews. Anyway, rabbit hole. So the coding interviews, I think the pattern I've seen is there are 3 different types. You've got the live coding interview, the on your own coding interview, and then the take-home assessment. So first, the live coding interview, exactly what you would think, what it sounds like, what you probably have in your mind is like, this is a coding interview. So it's scheduled, and you get on the Zoom call, and somebody else is there, and maybe you do some introductory for 5 minutes, or they just start explaining to you what it's going to be like, and then you get a link either in your email or through the video chat, whatever, and you go to the link and you get started. And then it's like free code camp is my experience with this sort of thing. You know, algorithms, that sort of thing. So it looks a lot like that. So it's on the left side of the screen, you have like the description and maybe some requirements, and then on the right you have like a coding environment. And I think that's a pretty common setup, something like that. So those challenges are all like data manipulation. I had one where, well, it wasn't a live coding interview. You're given some sort of like starting point usually, and then you have to get to a endpoint. Like here's a nested array, and you have to grab these subsets of things based on this. And yeah, if you do some leak code or some free code camp algorithms, you'll know what I'm talking about. So the second one, I covered that. The second one is like the on your own version of that. So it's not a call where somebody's on the call with you and watching your code. So it's a little easier to be more comfortable. It's not as high pressure and anxiety. So I like those a little better. Oh, actually, let me back up. So the live coding interview, to me, the key is to be talking the whole time. So and I think 1,000 people have said this before me, but if they can't see inside your head. So if you aren't talking to them, they have no idea what you're doing. So if you're sitting there, looking at it, trying to think of like, okay, what am I going to do? What do I do? Then, they have nothing to go on other than he hasn't done anything yet, or she hasn't done anything yet. Yeah, and I have some content out there about like the difference in companies that are looking for you to complete the challenge and companies that just want to see how you approach the problem and how you problem solve. So if you're interviewing with a company that's looking for how you problem solve, which is the company I like, the type of company I like, then if you're talking the whole time, then they have a much better idea of how you approach problems. And by the way, on these calls, it's always another software person who's on the call with you. So, they're going to know what you're talking about while you're talking. Okay, so yeah, I lost my train of thought. Going back to the take-home assessment. So I had a couple different types of these. One was like a React, or I'm a front-end guy, so it was like a React project, just very bare bones, and you're supposed to, in this one, make an API call and get back some images, it was dog images for this one I did. So different than cats, right? I'm not going to restart this video, and I'm not going to edit it. So you make the API call to get all the breeds of the dogs, and then you make API calls to get images for each of the dogs, and then you display them in like a grid, but like how bricks are like offset like that way. Yeah, and then the other ones are just like the algorithm problems, but it's on your own time. So, and then the third type of coding screen is a take-home assessment. And I was not a big fan of these until I did one, and then I really liked it because it was like a back-end position. So it was like a node coding challenge, and I have done node stuff, and I consider myself full stack. So I've done probably 3 years of node work, but I'd never worked with like buffers, like all the node. I say this, and somebody's gonna say, "You worked with Node and you didn't know what a buffer was." So no, I didn't, and yes, I did. All the Nodes work I've done has been like CRUD, like create, update, read, delete, and interacting with the database, which is CRUD, interacting with third-party APIs, and maybe doing some JavaScript in there, data manipulation. Anyway, so I had to learn like buffers, and it was a TCP endpoint, and so then I had to learn a little bit about streaming and messaging back and forth on TCP. Don't worry about anything I'm saying if you are not a Node person, but I really enjoyed the challenge because I got to learn new stuff, and it was challenging, and I got that like, oh my god, it works kind of feeling, a couple times. But I didn't get that job. Didn't get an offer from them. I was not good enough with Node, but I had fun. So the take-home challenge, and usually they say like, okay, here's this problem, work on it, submit your code, spend this much time, 2 hours, 4 hours, something like that. And you probably should only spend that amount of time. Like in my case, I worked 16 hours on that Node take-home challenge, and their suggestion was 2 to 4 hours. And just the fact that it took me 16 hours, it's an indicator to yourself, hey, this might not be a good fit. But again, I enjoyed it. So I was willing to, and I had nothing else to do. I was interviewing process, like in between interviews, working on it. So all the things I said there. Yeah, those are the 3 types. Interviewing, a lot of people don't like coding screens, but I found myself enjoying them. The more you do, the better you get at them, so don't feel bad if you tank some. And another thing I will say is you might feel like you tanked some and you actually did okay. And you might feel like you killed some, like, man, I really knocked that out of the park. And you might not get such good feedback. And that's just part of it, and it's, for me anyway, it's very hard to tell how you did in a coding interview. It just is. And like I said, and like I've said in other videos and posts and stuff, there's two types of companies in coding interviews: the kind that are looking for a technician, and the kind that are looking for someone technical who's the right fit. So the companies that are looking for a technician, like big tech is a great example. They want you to complete that code challenge and complete it, in a technically great manner, right? So the emphasis is on the technical part. And then in the other case, they're looking for someone who knows how to code, who maybe, whether they finish the challenge or not might be irrelevant. What's more important in those situations is how do they approach problems and can they code, and you can get that answers to both those questions, and somebody still not complete the challenge, and then still get an offer, or let's move forward. So don't think, okay, I have to complete the code challenge if you're interviewing with a certain type of company. And for me, I prefer to work for places where I would fit in, and for me that means not working for places where the emphasis is on the technical side, if you see what I mean.